History is full of amazing stories and memorable people.
But we don't care about them.
No hits, deep tracks only.
Some of the most influential people in the world have been completely overlooked or just plain forgotten.
We're digging deep into the history books to bring you their stories.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Matt.
We're not historians. We're just two guys who enjoy a great story and plenty of laughs.
This is History's B-Side.
Today's B-Siders are Anti-Santas.
It's a ho-ho History's B-Side special. I can't even say it. It's a ho-ho History's B-Side special.
Why are you making it Western?
I don't know. It's a
Or Southern or something.
It's a ho-ho.
You don't have to say that. I just thought it was funny.
It's a ho-ho History's B-Side special.
Woo!
Oh, man. So I figured it would be apropos to start today with a short discussion about our own Santa-themed holiday traditions, or just holiday traditions in general, that might be particular to our families.
Our first ever holiday episode with a Christmas theme. I don't know if we've done any themed episodes yet, but
we really haven't.
Since this will come out right before Christmas, might as well.
Yeah. Get into the holiday spirit. The ho-ho holiday spirit. So did Santa visit your house when you were younger? Does he still visit?
Yeah, I mean, if you ascribe to the belief in Santa Claus, then certainly he visited my house.
Phil, we might have children listening.
Sorry, James's daughter who listens to our podcast after school. No, unfortunately Santa does not visit my house currently, but there are no children here, so he just passes right over. He's a busy guy. He can't make stops at grown adults' house. Yeah. Millennials' houses. It's just sad.
He stops at my apartment.
He did used to come to my parents' house. Did he?
Every year. I mean,
You don't have a chimney.
No, but he just comes in the front door. I leave out lots of wine and whiskey and
That's why he stops there.
Some other fun things.
I'm like Scrooge with my wine and adult beverages.
Yeah.
I don't leave out for Santa.
What was Lincoln's bodyguard's name?
John Frederick
Parker. If Santa is John Frederick Parker, I am the bar outside during intermission.
He can't be drinking and riding the sleigh. That's dangerous. He's got a job to do.
When assuming he follows the general path that he does, I apologize to those who come after me, on the NORAD tracker, because after me, it's a big question mark whether or not you're actually going to get the gifts you asked for.
Which direction does that go? Does it go
I can't remember. I think it goes east to west, but that also, I guess that does make sense.
Would slow him down.
He follows the sun, right? He's following the day.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, because that would extend his night and give him more time, but I feel like that would slow down travel because weather patterns move the opposite way.
That's true.
And this is like a really dumb conversation to have before we get into this. But
No, I think it's exactly the sort of conversations I wanted us to have during this episode. So stay tuned. We're going to check in with the air traffic controlling elves at the North Pole and see how much we can find out about Santa's flight path.
I made the joke yesterday at work that Santa had to lay off all his elves and just resort to Amazon this year because he had to furlough them for the pandemic, and they all got used to collecting unemployment and didn't want to come back to work in the workshop.
Maybe Santa's not paying enough.
Well, yeah, he should offer better labor standards, higher wages, paid time off, sick leave.
$3,000 bonuses like Amazon currently is. Is this an Amazon ad?
Real benefits?
This is turned into an Amazon employment ad.
Yes, because when we're talking about great employers, the one that jumps to mind is Amazon.
I mean, if you like turnover.
Who doesn't?
I was actually listening to a podcast where they were talking about how Amazon has one of the highest turnover rates of any company, and they just decided to be okay with it, and they just planned their business model around constant turnover.
I mean, not to make comments about a former employer of mine, but that's kind of exactly how Panera was, where they just didn't pay. Like, we never paid anyone above minimum wage because they figured it was cheaper to keep wages down than it was to worry about training new employees. And it's any minimum wage job is like that. Like, that's kind of, not to get into a whole different argument that's unrelated to this episode, Christmas, but that's why the argument for like a increased minimum wage just isn't feasible, because employers are always going to look to cut costs for unskilled labor.
Man, 5 minutes in, we're already having a tangent about wage and employment. Our listeners are in for a ride.
So when you're out shopping for Christmas gifts this year or ordering on Amazon, remember to think about and be nice to your retail workers who are making very little money to deal with your problems.
Ho ho hospitality. And back to Santa. So, now you know what I leave out for Santa, which attracts him to my apartment. Did your family ever leave out like milk and cookies?
Yeah, we did that as kids. I want to say at some point in elementary school or something, we had like a class craft where we made a special plate that we would leave out every year. And sometimes in school we'd make that like reindeer food thing that we'd sprinkle out on our front porch.
Yeah, we did that same.
And we'd always run out in the morning to see if it was gone, or to see if there was like reindeer prints in the snow, if there was snow. So I'm sure my parents hoped for no snow, so they didn't have to go through the extra length to
put reindeer prints,
put up appearances.
Yeah, we used to put a carrot out for Rudolph. I don't know why Rudolph got more food than the rest of the reindeer, or why he needed a carrot, but
favoritism.
We did that.
Nepotism. Back to the wage conversation.
This is actually an episode critiquing the working conditions at the North Pole for both animal and mythical creature.
The topic is anti-Santas, but it's not about individuals. It's just how we are very anti-Santa because he's a slave driver.
Yeah, not about it. I want to socialize the North Pole.
I feel like of all places, the North Pole is probably the
I know.
most
I was just thinking that. I was like, I'm sure it is.
Everyone contributes to the labor movement. There's only one person who's in charge of the whole thing. They distribute all the goods equally to all children throughout the world. Like, it's a pretty socialist environment up in the North Pole.
That's true. Don't tell Fox News. Their Christmas tree just burned down apparently in New York, so
yeah, I saw that.
It'd be a really crummy day for them. So you fed the reindeer, you fed Santa. Did you ever receive a lump of coal?
Of course not, Matthew. I was the perfect child.
I'm sure you were.
I never did anything wrong. No, I'm not sure if, I don't know. My parents never really, like, teased that, I guess. I think we maybe got, like, the candy that was, like, wrapped to look like a lump of coal type thing. But, I don't know. I don't think we were ever really, like, taunted with the idea of not getting Christmas gifts. I guess I should be grateful that my parents were generous in that aspect.
I mean, the phrase was definitely thrown around like, you got to be nice this year, you got to be good, or you'll get coal in your stocking, but like never actually received coal. Mm-hmm. But given the like severity of some of the punishments we're going to talk about today, the lump of coal that's common in American Christmas canon is actually pretty tame. In fact, Isn't
it crazy how we torment children with this? Like,
it is kind of wild.
You better behave or you're going to be punished by some mythical character.
Some mythical character is going to bring you fuel.
And then there'd always be the argument that was like, oh, coal's valuable. You can turn it into diamonds or burn it for fuel. And it's like, no, you can't just do that. Like, that takes millions of years or some machinery that you as a 8-year-old child do not have.
Oh no, I had a pressurized diamond making machine. It was made by Lego.
Your dad probably made it out of PVC and confetti cannons.
If you point all the confetti cannons towards this certain point in the center of the contraption, that's where you put the coal, and the pressure just...
You get enough CO2 cartridges to provide the pressure on the coal.
So we're going to talk about some anti-Santas today who, like I said, have some pretty intense punishments for naughty children that go well beyond receiving a lump of coal. But before we get into them, we wanted to talk about the history of the one we know, the history of Santa Claus, St. Nicholas.
Yeah, so I think we're going to kind of handle this one a little bit like we did our live episode, if you remember that one from way back over the summer. But I'm going to kind of get into the history of the traditional Santa Claus that we know, at least the American Santa Claus, and how his history kind of spreads from European countries and eventually became sort of a global myth, a global concept. And then we'll throw it back to Matt, who will get into some of Santa's cast of characters, supporting characters who maybe aren't all the nicest people. But the story of Santa really starts with St. Nicholas, which is a name that we all know throughout Christmas lore, St. Nick, but he was a very real guy. And this is obviously going to be like the A-sider to history here. Like, this is probably the person that's most steeped in history that we'll talk about on this episode, but it's a story that a lot of people maybe don't know how we got from St. Nicholas to Santa Claus. And I think that's kind of a cool backstory when you get into the Christmas season. So St. Nicholas was born during the 3rd century in the village of Patara, which is in Asia Minor. Today, that's the country of Turkey. It's actually in a city that's known as Demir. I might be mispronouncing this because, gonna be honest, focusing on the Christmas theme, we didn't look up too much on the pronunciations on all of these. But he's from that region, which we knew as Asia Minor. Today, it's modern-day Turkey. He was born to a very wealthy family, but unfortunately, his parents died during an epidemic when he was still pretty young. Still, they inspired a strong Christian faith in him, and he was inspired by Jesus' words in Matthew 19:21 to sell what you own and give the money to the poor. And he used this as kind of inspiration for how he lived his life. And he actually used the inheritance that he received from his wealthy parents to help the needy, sick, and suffering. And that was just kind of his MO throughout life, was just being very generous and giving away all that he had. Eventually, St. Nick, or St. Nicholas, became the Bishop of Myra, which was a southern Mediterranean coastal city in Turkey. He was actually persecuted and imprisoned along with a lot of other Christian clergymen by the Roman Emperor Diocletian. And later he was freed by Emperor Constantine, who was really the first Roman emperor to kind of embrace Christianity and make it, at least take the first steps of becoming this like Roman Catholic empire that we knew through a lot of history and still sort of exists today, even though, you know, Rome and Italy are not run by the Catholic Church. It still has huge, huge influence on that region and really throughout the world. St. Nicholas died on December 6th of the year 343, and that date is now today known as St. Nicholas Day. He actually was never formally canonized as a saint because his life predated the process of canonizing individuals into saints by over 700 years. And this would be common of a lot of early saints, such as Jesus' apostles and other biblical figures. By the time that this canonization process was formalized, he was already widely regarded and accepted as a saint by pretty much the Catholic Church worldwide.
So he lived during the 3rd century. He's far closer to the time of Jesus and the apostles as he is to us, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's not to say like he was walking around with Jesus and the apostles.
Sure.
Like, he's still 300 years later, but he's definitely one of, if we were calling him or going along with our timeline of people we've talked about in history, he's definitely one of the older ones that we've talked about. He's
interesting. If I had to
pretty early on.
If I had to guess, I would have assumed he was Northern European in origin and like more of a Middle Ages kind of.
Yeah, I think that stems because a lot of our traditions of Christmas time stem from these Northern European countries. Yeah. But these types of religious leaders, especially the early founders and early saints of Christianity and especially Catholicism, had such an influence on Europe and that region of the world as a whole that we kind of just picture them as being from Italy and other countries in that region, whereas a lot of them do really come from Asia Minor and Northern Africa and very Eastern Asia. So it's kind of like a weird way we look at history that maybe isn't always right. Yeah. Today, St. Nicholas is known as the patron saint and protector of children and of sailors, which was surprising to me, but he grew up, or was the bishop on a coastal city, so he actually was, there's a lot of legends around his story, and some of them involved him actually rescuing sinking ships and ships that were caught in storms. But traditionally, we do think of him more as the protector of children, which is kind of why he got this association with Christmas time.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's a lot of legends around St. Nicholas and his generosity. The most famous one is that of a poor man with 3 daughters, and this story is kind of the one that shapes the St. Nick that we know from Christmas time. So this story, I pulled it directly from stnicholascenter.org. I'm just going to read it to you. It says that in those days, a young woman's father had to offer prospective husbands something of value, or a dowry. The larger the dowry, the better chance that the young woman would find a good husband. And without a dowry, a woman was unlikely to marry. This poor man's daughters, without dowries, were therefore destined to be sold into slavery. Of course, we have to talk about slavery on any episode of History's B-Side, even the Christmas one.
Always.
Mysteriously, on 3 different occasions, a bag of gold appeared in their home, providing the needed dowries. The bags of gold, tossed through an open window, or in some stories they were dropped down the chimney, are said to have landed in stockings or shoes left before the fire to dry. This led to the custom of children hanging stockings or putting out shoes, eagerly awaiting gifts from St. Nicholas. Sometimes the story is told with gold balls instead of bags of gold, which is why 3 gold balls, sometimes represented as oranges, are one of the symbols for St. Nicholas. And so St. Nicholas is a gift giver.
And that's how he started stuffing himself down chimneys.
Well, we'll get to that later on for sure. But I actually read that the idea of him tossing these down chimneys is definitely not true, because chimneys didn't exist then.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, more than likely, if this story is to be believed, he would have tossed the gold in through a window. I don't know if the story is true or not. It's just kind of the legend around St. Nicholas. And there were other stories of him being very generous in this way. But this is the one that's kind of most associated with him, and why we celebrate St. Nicholas Day as a day that he would bring gifts. So today, children around the world, and by that particularly it's in Europe and traditional Catholic American homes, celebrate St. Nicholas Day by hanging stockings or putting out their shoes, or clogs if you're in the Netherlands, on December 5th, or St. Nicholas Day Eve. So when they wake up on December 6th, their stockings or shoes will be filled with small gifts or sweets, sometimes little fruits or candies. This day is celebrated in early December so as to not overshadow the Christ child on Christmas Day. So they would celebrate St. Nicholas Day early in December, and then Christmas at the end of the month. So now let's talk about how St. Nicholas became Santa Claus. In the 16th century, following the Reformation, the stories and traditions of St. Nicholas fell out of popularity, especially in Northern Europe. Obviously, Catholicism didn't have quite the influence that it had, so
Right.
The legends of some of their most popular saints sort of dwindled a bit. Still, Christmas was a popular holiday, so the traditions were also popular, and a figure was needed to deliver presents to children. So, St. Nicholas got a rebrand.
I'm hearing Mad Men music. Big advertising enters the scene.
This is the first commercial side of Christmas. In the United Kingdom, and particularly England, he became Saint Christmas, Father Christmas, or Old Man Christmas. And originally this was just portrayed to be the personification of Christmas. So it was a man who was supposed to represent everything that Christmas was. He wasn't any specific person from history. France had their own version of Father Christmas, who was called Père Noël. And there's these types of things in other countries too. I remember when we were in school, we learned about Babbo Natale from Italy.
Yeah.
So Father Christmas essentially was big throughout Europe, but it wasn't this Santa Claus originally. It was this personified version of Christmas. In certain parts of Austria and Germany, they celebrated the Christkind, which was a golden-haired baby with wings who symbolizes the newborn baby Jesus. Totally different take.
A little bit more like connected to the,
Yeah.
the birth of Jesus, I suppose.
Yeah, but definitely a far reach from Santa Claus or some kind of old man character that we would perceive today. Then, as immigrants traveled to the United States, the original traditions in America were Kris Kringle, which was actually derived from Christkind. And you can kind of see where the name sort of comes from it, but that's where we get the term Kris Kringle. And that was really the first version of any type of Christmas mythical figure in America.
Yeah.
As Dutch settlers arrived, they brought with them the original traditions of St. Nicholas, and the two sort of merged to form what was called Sinterklaas. And Sinterklaas, for people just listening, obviously, is spelled Sinterklaas. So not really what you're thinking, although you can already see where Sinterklaas would eventually turn into Santa Claus.
Yeah.
This fictional Sinterklaas began to take on some of the traditional legends of St. Nicholas. Sinterklaas is actually still celebrated as the legendary Christmas figure in the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and parts of northern France. And like I said, for America, it's easy to see that transition from Sinterklaas to what would be our eventual Santa Claus.
So are we strictly talking about the evolution of the word, or are there differences in the form or traditions that come with Sinterklaas versus Santa Claus? I mean, I assume ours is more Americanized, but are they essentially the same figure?
At the time, they would have been very similar.
Okay.
So this character was sort of one of the more popular traditions of Christmas in the early 1800s and maybe even a little sooner than that. But it wasn't portrayed as like Sinterklaas at this time was not the fat man in the red suit with the big white beard and the riding on a sleigh with reindeer.
Yeah.
Eventually we would get to that character, but Sinterklaas is similar. I believe he's usually portrayed as having a beard and some kind of red cloak, but he's not necessarily like the Santa figure that you think of in your head when you say Santa Claus.
Right.
And I mean, that's kind of just how our traditions shape over time. So now we'll take that step into transitioning to Santa Claus. In 1821, a poem titled Old Santy Claus with Much Delight was published anonymously in New York. This was the first work to depict this Christmas character in a sleigh pulled by reindeer. And the poem was published with 8 illustrations that portrayed Old Santa Claus as hefty with a beard and a red coat. And like I said, the red coat wouldn't have been much of a stretch. The St. Nicholas characters or Sinterklaas or whoever you were celebrating at the time often was portrayed wearing red, because even the real St. Nicholas would have worn red robes while he was serving as a bishop. Then in 1823, 2 years later, the much more famous poem titled A Visit from St. Nicholas, or as most of our listeners will probably know it, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, was published by Clement Clarke Moore. This poem describes St. Nicholas as, quote, chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and that he had a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. Now, the popularity of these two poems further intertwine the legends of St. Nicholas, Sinterklaas, and Old Santa Claus, which of course would turn into and eventually form today's Santa Claus. Over time, this legend has continued to grow and mold into what we recognize it today. The UK's Father Christmas, which, as we said, was the personification of Christmas, would eventually take on the American Santa Claus, and the two would grow much more alike and now share almost the exact same story. So if you were to go into the UK today, or a lot of countries in Europe that recognize this Father Christmas character, he's kind of shaped into the American Santa Claus. He's no longer this old man who just represents Christmas. He is the fat, chubby guy in the red coat with the big white beard who travels around on a sleigh and delivers presents.
He's making more money.
Got a better rebrand.
It is interesting how they all kind of merge together over time, though.
Yeah, and there are lots of countries around Europe that celebrate these different characters still. Like I said, they're still recognized as St. Nicholas or Father Christmas or Kris Kringle, Santa Claus, Sinterklaas, or really any of these mythical Christmas old men guys, but they all sort of had this same look and same story now, just because Christmas has become such a huge thing, at least even commercially beyond the religious aspect to it, that it's just he's become a mascot by many names that all kind of have the same story.
So now that we have a bit of background on the main character behind all of these Christmas wishes and Christmas gifts, we're going to jump into some a little bit more evil and nefarious Christmas characters that come along with St. Nicholas for whatever reason might be. But before we do that, we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back.
Matt, you like coffee, right?
I love coffee.
Would you ever want to buy me a coffee?
Anytime, Phil. Just say the word.
You know, our dedicated listeners could also buy me a coffee.
Could they buy me a coffee as well?
They could buy you a coffee.
This sounds fantastic.
We set up this service called Buy Me a Coffee at buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside.
And people can buy us a coffee?
Yeah, it's really just a way for people to support the show if they enjoy the show. And if they're listening to the show, we sure hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, otherwise you're just, wasting your time.
At buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside, there's 3 ways that our listeners can interact with the show. Number 1, you can just donate to the show by clicking Buy Them a Coffee.
2, you can join as a member for $10 a month or $100 a year. Being a member gains you some pretty cool perks. You get access to our monthly bonus episode, History's B-Side Battles, access to our future episode queue, a name shout-out on a future episode. We'll also send you a handwritten thank you postcard and sticker set, and more perks will be announced as we continue on.
There's also some different extras that people can get on our Buy Me a Coffee website. Things like choosing the topic for a future episode. If there's a lesser known person in history that you have an interest in, let us know and we'll do an episode all about them. You can also buy sets of custom postcards, sticker sets, and future merchandise that we add on there as well. Or you can draft your own advertisement script and we will promote whatever you want in a segment like this.
The website again is buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside.
Matt,
Yeah.
you owe me a coffee.
Oh. Do I get a coffee too?
You're buying.
All right.
All right, welcome back. So we left off kind of having covered a nice foundation of the story of Father Christmas or Santa Claus or Sinterklaas or whatever you want to call him based on where you are in the world. And this is a story we're pretty much all familiar with. But as I tried to find alternative versions, because originally this episode was going to just be other, unheard of versions of Santa, but I kept finding ones that were really dark and really kind of terrifying, used to kind of morally scare children into behaving properly. And they were...
Which is really a terrifying concept.
It has a touch of emotional abuse.
Parenting through the Christmas spirit. This is an episode that kids should listen to.
So anyway, I was so struck by how many of these dark versions of Santa, and the fact that in a lot of cultures, these darker characters actually accompany St. Nicholas on his journey, and sometimes are part of a team with him, was even more interesting. And I just kept imagining all of the goofy, funny, ridiculous conversations we would have. So let's let those commence.
All right.
So I tried to organize these as best as possible so that they'd flow, and like later ones that are similar to the first one we're going to talk about would come after it. But bear with us because there's going to be a little jumping around and I have more information about some of these. But basically, they're all anti-Santas. Starting with one that I think a lot of people might know these days because it's become kind of a pop culture phenomenon in recent years. And there's been a movie about it, and that is Krampus.
Which is just a beautiful name
Krampus.
for Christmas.
So Krampus is traditionally associated with European alpine folklore, but like most lore, it has circulated steadily around the globe, similar to the way Saint Nicholas kind of spread as Catholicism spread. In fact, as I just mentioned, modern-day Krampus celebrations are held in Germany, Poland, Italy, and Austria, and now several major cities across the United States also hold Krampus celebrations each year.
He's just a hipster Santa.
He is kind of like a hipster Santa. This is definitely something that I feel like would go on in Portland. I will be surprised if there's not a Krampus celebration here. And he's basically the anti-Saint Nicholas, the opposite of Santa Claus. And a lot of what his character holds in terms of his look and his actions are, what you'd imagine as the exact opposite of Santa Claus. He's not this like cuddly, chubby guy with a beard and all jolly. He's an ugly mythical creature, usually depicted with similar features as the devil, such as body hair, horns, hooves, and fangs. And I looked up some pictures of like Krampus masks and different depictions of him, and it is pretty terrifying. I almost don't want to see this movie because it's not pleasant. He's like,
it's a Christmas movie.
Yeah, he's like almost goat-like. Sometimes he looks like a bat. He's like the head of a bat with like the body of a goat. He definitely looks like older depictions of the devil that we'd be used to.
Yeah.
And if that wasn't bad enough, he carries with him chains and birch rods, which he uses to beat misbehaving children and whisk them off to hell.
This kind of reminds me of that Office episode where they celebrate Dwight's Christmas and he comes in as Bellschnickel.
Yes.
And like beats them with the whatever he has, brush broom thing.
Well, there's a lot of similarities between our B-siders for today, and we're actually going to cover Bellschnickel in just a moment.
Okay.
But yeah, so he carries with him these chains and rods to beat children, because, So a little bit about his, roots. Krampus is considered the son of the Norse god Hel, the ruler of Helheim, or the underworld. As such, he's a reminder of some of the pagan roots of Christmas celebrations. As early Christianity began spreading throughout Europe, its adherents started to interact with pagans, and eventually borrowed some of their festivals, repackaging them in ways that resonated with their own religious narratives. December 6th, as we've talked about, is known as St. Nicholas Day in many parts of Europe. And just like All Saints' Day, St. Nicholas Day has its darker half, which takes place the night before, known as Krampusnacht, or Krampus Night. It is traditionally viewed as the night when the demon carries out his tricks on all the wicked children of the world.
I can only imagine how fun this holiday would be for parents.
This sounds so much fun, and it makes me feel like maybe I'm not fit for fatherhood, because there's something about just terrifying my children the night before Santa comes that makes working for Santa to come all the much more rewarding.
When Reed and I have a kid, you need to come home the night before Krampusnacht. And we'll just be, hanging out on the couch, watching TV, playing a family board game or something like that. And then you come dressed as Krampus and start rapping on the windows and terrifying
metal chains.
Yes. No holds barred. You have full permission.
I feel like Odie's going to eat me if I do that.
No, he'll bark at you, but he won't bite you.
I wouldn't try doing that with Barley in the house. I don't think he would like that.
Do families still celebrate both Krampusnacht and St. Nicholas Day, or is it separate regions and religions and cultures that would have both?
There's certainly people who celebrate both or one or the other, but I think in general they're a package deal. I think the idea is the night before St. Nicholas Day, i.e. Krampusnacht, the wicked children are punished by Krampus, and then the good children make it through to the morning and get goodies in their shoes. So
put your shoes by the fire, you might get treats, or you might get dragged down to hell
by this demon goat. Yeah, so I think they're generally part of the same culture, just opposite sides of this holiday. And this is what I meant earlier when I said the lump of coal is quite tame. It's not something I'm used to from American culture, being pretty tame and non-violent comparatively.
We're way too soft on our kids.
I was never told about a demon goat man that would come and beat me. So traditionally, and this is the weird part, I guess, is that children leave their shoes out for Krampus to fill with treats as well, if they've been nice. Or a birch rod, if they've been naughty.
So would you rather get coal or a birch rod?
You know, like I said, I mean, coal is useful, but I don't know. I'm a dirty boy, Phil. I think I'm going to take the birch rod. This sounds fun.
I mean, for a kid, I don't think coal's quite that useful. So at least a birch rod you could make some kind of game out of or something.
I guess that's true. I mean, I wasn't thinking that he would give you the birch rod as a gift.
You say they'd put it in his shoe, or they'd put it in your shoe?
Yeah, but I think he just hits you with the birch rod. He'll fill your shoes with treats if you were good, or hit you with the rod if you've been naughty. I don't know, like how naughty.
Well, then I'd rather be gifted coal than beat with a stick.
I feel like I'd be a nightmare to tell the story to, because it'd be like, what level of naughty do I just get hit with the birch rod and not dragged to hell? Is there like, is it like the justice system where there's different degrees of things?
Plead your case before Krampus.
Right. So this is, in pop culture at least, become a little bit more of like a joke celebration during Christmas. Festivities have become much more modernized in recent years. And the more common modernized take on the tradition involves drunken men dressed as devils who take over the streets for a Krampus loaf, a Krampus run of sorts. People are chased through the streets by the devils.
This seems like the Portland celebration of it. People get drunk and then they do like a fun run at midnight with everyone dressed like Krampus.
This sounds terrifying to catch, like, if you weren't ready for it or knew it was going on. Like, you just see this running down the street.
It's just kind of dangerous if they're all drunk doing it totally.
Too. Yeah, large crowds of drunk people running has never led to anything good. Some celebrations, and this is awesome, some celebrations include switching stations, where, in the spirit of the lore surrounding the holiday, participants can go and get spanked by people dressed as Krampuses.
Voluntarily go get hit with a switch.
That's like
it's kinky.
Yeah, I know. It's like I don't know, kinky version of Santa, which makes me feel so weird, because going to see Santa at a like shopping mall is a children's activity. I hope the switching stations aren't for children.
The adult version.
And to kind of wrap up the Krampus story, because we've got a lot to get through. If you want to know more about Krampus or experience some of the more modern take on his lore, in 2015, a Krampus movie was released depicting the story as a horror/comedy film.
Have you seen
it?
I
haven't. I looked up some of the like screenshots and previews for this episode, but I have not watched the film.
I think we're going to have a History's B-side movie night soon.
All right, Krampus, baby. So, Krampus is not the only character who, carries with him a bit of evil into the Christmas holiday, Christmas tradition.
Speaks softly and carries a big stick.
Exactly. So, the next one we're going to talk about is Hans Trapp, which is another anti-Santa figure from the French-German border region of Alsace-Lorraine. And for whatever reason, a lot of these come from Germany, and southern Germany, Austria, the France-German border.
Do you know why that is?
I don't. I mean, I feel like there's probably some sort of cultural reason why these like almost punishment-based anti-Santas were kept springing up in southern Germany. I don't know if they just had really
just much stricter parenting,
or like maybe the kids there were just like,
or
really
the kids
naughty.
are really
bad. All the kids keep misbehaving. They're stealing from banks and hitting people on the street. We need to figure out how to take control of the situation.
We can't control them. We need to mentally abuse them.
So legend tells of how Trapp began as a wealthy man, but greedy and evil to boot. He was so rotten that he was excommunicated by the Catholic Church and sold his soul to Satan.
So, I guess I meant to ask this about Krampus, and maybe this will be an issue with a lot of your anti-Santas. Is he a real person? Like, he's not just a made-up character?
At least as far as Hans Trapp, it seems to be more like St. Nicholas, where he was an actual person, or there's a person that people point to that kind of started the lore, but over time, myth and reality kind of mixed into this story. This kind of mythical
Is that
folklore.
common with these? Like, does Krampus have a real person behind him, or is he more just a
Krampus
mythical character?
Did not appear to have a real person behind him. If I had to pick one, I guess I would say the devil. But like,
okay, yeah,
that's not like a human person that like came along and they were like, we're gonna make a story out of you. But there is, and we'll talk about the human inspiration behind the folklore. But as far as Hans Trapp, because Hans Trapp is the fictional name for him, beyond redemption, Hans Trapp was exiled to the forest, though his evil was still felt. He began disguising himself as a scarecrow by stuffing straw into his clothing, naturally. And as with Krampus, he began to prey on children. There it is.
Naturally.
One day, or so the legend says, Hans Trapp was about to eat a small boy he had captured when God, fed up with his evil doing, killed him with a bolt of lightning. I like this idea that like God was just
thank God for stepping in.
I love this idea of God, where it's just like Hans Trapp is going around eating children, and eventually God's just like, you know what? I'm tired of this. This is the last. This is the last straw. No more children eating. You've gotten away with it long enough. However, God striking him with this bolt of lightning was not the end of Hans Trapp, and he continued to roam the earth dressed as a scarecrow. Like Krampus, Hans Trapp teamed up with St. Nicholas, but instead to earn redemption. While St. Nicholas awarded presents to the virtuous, Hans Trapp tries to persuade naughty children to mend their ways and be virtuous, unlike him.
So he's kind of a good character? Like, does he still torment the children, or he's just like a lesson of don't be like I was?
I think it probably depends on who's telling the story or where it's being told, but I think over time it became a little bit tamer. It became less necessary to have him like threatening to eat children. But I like that transformation. He starts off as like this scarecrow demon that eats kids and like captures them and kidnaps them, and then all of a sudden he changes tune after getting hit with a bolt of lightning, and he's like, you know what, I'm just gonna sit down with the kid and explain to him like, look, I used to eat you guys, but instead, like, let me just tell you how it worked out for me and why you shouldn't be evil.
Hans Trapp got soft.
I know. I imagine him like just sitting in the corner of the children's bedroom like, all right guys, here's what I've been through. He's like a mythical motivational speaker.
Yeah. Scared straight.
But, and like we mentioned a couple minutes ago, unlike Krampus, Hans Trapp has his origins in a historical personage. Hans von Troth, a 2-meter high, late 15th century German knight. I don't know why 2 meter high was of note in the research, but it was.
That's insanely tall.
It is really tall.
That's why it's of note.
So he was a 2 meter tall, late 15th century German knight with a terrible reputation. And remember, this is the actual human that Hans Trapp is based off of. Von Troth had lands and castles on the German side of the border with France, and was a thorough nuisance to the church and the lady alike. Von Troth was involved in a land dispute with a local abbot. As part of the feud, he ordered the Weisslater River blocked, depriving the nearby town of Weissenberg of its water supply. When the abbot complained, von Troth petulantly tore down the dam, flooding Weissenberg and destroying its economy.
Oh. Wow.
Petty. In 1491, von Troth even managed to get himself excommunicated, much like the story of Hans Trapp, after the same abbot complained about him to the Pope, and von Troth insolently refused to go to Rome to give an account of his behavior. Von Troth's sinister appearance, destructive behavior, and excommunication from the church all became mixed up in myth, and after his death, led to the creation of Hans Trapp as a warning to children on how not to live their lives.
Fair enough. Good lesson.
However, the end of the real Hans Trapp was no gruesome mystery, for Hans von Troth died quietly at home of natural causes in his castle at Bergbartstein. It's a little bit more human, I guess, character here.
Yeah. I mean, at least he was just kind of like a lesson for kids to not be like this rather than necessarily going around and eating children or dragging them to hell.
Later on, I like I said, if you're gonna eat children for a period of time, I want to see you redeem yourself and come back and like change your ways, persuade them.
We're all about second chances here.
So our third anti-Santa is one that you mentioned earlier and that fans of The Office might be vaguely familiar with because of Dwight, which is Bellschnickel. Bellschnickel reminded me most of Krampus in terms of like comparison, but he's a scary, darker Christmas visitor in the southwest of Germany, again, and amongst German-speaking communities in the United States. He's also known as Bellschnickel, Bellschnickel, Pellsnickel, Pellschnickel, and all of those names literally translate as Walloping Nicky. And the article I read about him said, and I quote, "He is a Nicholas that thumps."
I love that. We don't use the word walloping enough.
Walloping Nicky. It sounds like a boxer. Because of this, some say he is a version of St. Nicholas, but he isn't exactly. Whilst Nicholas is the name of the saint, there are also examples of the name Nicholas being used for the devil. Bellschnickel is usually portrayed as crotchety, grumpy, and very scary, particularly for children who have been bad. At his most fearsome...
Or as Dwight would say, impish.
Impish.
Admirable or impish?
So he's this crotchety, grumpy man, I guess, man. And at his most fearsome, he would appear at the door, dressed in tatty furs with a long white beard, rattling chains and branches of birch against the window until let in. This is the part that I love. Once he entered the house, he would be able to sense which children had been bad. Bad children would be hit with a switch, naturally.
Yep.
In some versions, sometimes it would just be a threat. And then the children were made to perform a song or dance and promise to be good. I love this. He gets in the house, immediately just hits children with a switch. All of these stories are really just about terrible nighttime intruders. These are not good lessons to teach children.
Pretty much. Lock your doors.
If somebody breaks into your house at night and beats you, you need to change your behavior.
I want to hear your apology song that you would perform for Bellschnickel if you were naughty.
Oh, God, I don't know. I'm sorry, Mr. Bellschnickel.
What rhymes with Bellschnickel?
On the opposite side of the coin, though, Bellschnickel would reward good children with gifts of candies, fruit, and cookies. And it's this like same dynamic that it's so strange for me to understand, maybe because I'm not from these cultures, but man enters house, beats the bad children, but happened to think of bringing candies and treats for the good ones.
Yeah, we don't picture Santa Claus as like the judge, jury, and executioner. He's like the judge, but like he only brings good things mostly because Cole really isn't that bad. Whereas this guy will come in and judge you and either give you a gift or just beat you.
Right.
Are you excited for him to come or not? Because you're really not sure until he's there.
Nope, we don't know.
The song Santa Claus is Coming to Town is not necessarily as happy when it's Bellschnickel is coming to
Yeah,
town.
right. It doesn't even sound like, I don't know, it just doesn't have the same cozy ring to it. Bellschnickel.
Bellschnickel is coming to town.
And with that, we're going to wrap up the Bellschnickel conversation. Our fourth anti-Santa is a woman by the name of Frau Perkta.
Let me guess. Germany?
Germany, yes. Told in Germany and Austria, sometimes feature a witch named Frau Perkta, who hands out both rewards and punishments during the 12 days of Christmas, December 25th through Epiphany on January 6th. And I think it's interesting, all of these either will reward or punish you based on whether or not you are good.
Like I said, American children are soft. They need more fear in their
Well,
lives.
it just doesn't seem balanced. Like, if you're good in America, Santa brings you, like, a stocking full of candy, a PS4, and some new socks. And then if you're bad, you just get a rock. That's your... These poor kids in Germany are getting shit kicked out of them by demons. American Santa's just like, here's a rock.
Try better next year.
Frau Perkta is best known for her gruesome punishment of the sinful. And this one I love, even more than the Bellschnickel or Krampus. If Frau Perkta visits you and decides you were bad, she will rip out your internal organs and replace them with garbage. Like, what kind of garbage? Is it like old Starbucks cups, or is it rotting food? Like, what kind of garbage?
Our first female anti-Santa, and she's the worst one of all.
She's just like, here, I'm going to replace your colon with a tire that I found in the local dump.
Bellschnickel will beat you with a stick, but Frau Perkta will kill you.
Gruesomely, I might add.
Yes, very gruesomely.
The ugly image of Perkta might show up in Christmas processions in Austria, somewhat like Krampus. So there is some cultures that have a similar celebration around Frau Perkta. It's just a whole lot.
Do they have both Krampus and Frau Perkta?
I don't know if they go together. I mean, Frau Perkta delivers...
Those kids would not be looking forward to Christmas.
I mean, I guess it's possible they could do both, because Krampus is on the 5th, and this is December 25th through January 6th. So this is almost a full month later. So I imagine maybe they both come. Yay.
If you haven't changed your ways between January 6th and Christmas, maybe you deserve to have your organs ripped out.
Frau Perkta shows up, makes you wish she was the Bellschnickel. You're like, please, he just beat me. She's on some Ted Bundy stuff right there. Our next anti-Santa, Black Peter, is somewhat similar to Krampus and Bellschnickel in that he accompanies Saint Nicholas. But he goes along with the Sinterklaas string of tradition, so more in Northern European countries. The story goes that Sinterklaas is accompanied by his servant Zwart Piet, or Black Peter, or sometimes several Black Peters, which is where it gets a little funny and weird to me. It's just like clones of Black Peter running all over your house.
I know this one, and it's not good.
It's pretty terrible in multiple ways. So, along with Sinterklaas, Black Peter keeps tabs on children and whether they are good. Good children will get a present or candy from Sinterklaas, and bad children will be punished by Black Peter. There are various different versions of the scary things Black Peter will do to bad children, and these are some of them. He will take them away in a sack back to Spain. In some of the oldest versions. I don't know if that's
back to Spain?
I guess that's where Black Peter's from.
Okay. I was like, the children were in Spain, but that makes more sense.
It makes me curious about like the view of Spain and the Iberian Peninsula among Northern European cultures. Like, is that like a bad place to go?
It must be. I mean, there's probably some racial aspects. I mean, clearly there's racial aspects to Black Peter.
Yeah.
But there must be towards the Spanish cultures, or maybe it was towards the Basque. This is speculation. Don't know this for sure, but maybe it's towards the Basque country that we talked about in a way earlier episode, but just how there was some racial undertones to that.
He's going to drag you to Spain, where you're going to be fed cured ham, delicious cheese, and some nice Tempranillo. Black Peter also was known to beat children with a birch rod or broomstick, or leave them a lump of coal in their stocking, which is a tamer, more recent version that kind of goes along with Santa.
It's cool, though, that you can kind of see how the Santa Krampus variations all kind of connect to each other or build off one another.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a mixing of cultures, I think, as people moved around Europe. And this happened over like 1,000 years, at least. I mean, hundreds of years at the very least. So it is interesting how they kind of borrowed things that worked and evolved over time.
Yeah, whatever scares the children.
Exactly. In recent times, the way Black Peter is depicted is very controversial. As you said, there's a lot of racial undertones here. He's depicted as a servant of St. Nicholas, and this has connotations with the slavery of black people. Although some say the reason Black Peter is black is because he gets covered in soot from coming down the chimneys and dropping off lumps of coal for the children, which seems like a, I don't know, semantic, unnecessary argument to start to have. It's like, no, he's depicted as black because he's covered in coal.
I think that's a new explanation to justify why they still continue to portray him as Black Peter.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure originally Black Peter had nothing to do with being covered in soot. And there are like community celebrations today of Black Peter where he's almost always portrayed as a white man wearing blackface.
Right.
So like,
not great.
I don't. Yeah,
it's not a stellar.
It's almost like maybe we can retire that character because it's just not
right. Like
really
why? One, I think the point you made is really, really good about like. I mean, we're talking about Northern European countries. He takes them back to Spain in older versions, which is, kind of a melting pot of Southern Mediterranean and African Arabic cultures. And I don't buy that didn't have, back when this was created, I don't buy that it didn't have racial connotations to it. Right. We're talking hundreds of years ago.
Right.
I'm certain that it probably did.
If it was soot, they probably wouldn't call him Black Peter. They'd call him like Dirty Peter or something.
Right. I've now lost track of how many we've done. I think this is our 6th anti-Santa. So we've got Pear Futard, who is a French anti-Santa. The legend of Pear Futard, whose name translates to Father Whipper. I'm not sure if he's a guy who whips fathers or a father who whips. Either way. So the story, though, begins with an evil butcher who craved children to eat.
Of course.
Naturally. He or his wife lured 3 boys into his butcher shop where he killed, chopped, and salted them. Some real Ted Bundy stuff now.
Gotta season it.
Of course. Well, we don't want it to go bad. What a waste. Fortunately, St. Nicholas came to the rescue, resurrected the boys, and took custody of the butcher. The captive butcher became Pear Futard, St. Nicholas's servant, whose job it is to dispense punishment to bad children on St. Nicholas Day. So kind of like Black Peter is the servant to St. Nicholas.
The people who come up with all of these, like, for the intention of scaring children, like, these characters serve no other purpose. Like, the ones that don't even bring stuff for the good kids.
It's terrible.
The people who come up with these are psychopaths.
They are. It's horrible. It is definitely on some level, like, I think abusive to be like, if you don't behave in these minor ways this year, some guy's going to show up and chop you up and salt your meat. Like, that's terrifying. I mean, the lump of coal thing is kind of like tongue-in-cheek and a joke. But, like, I don't know. I don't know how seriously people are telling children that somebody's going to show up and replace their organs with garbage or tear them apart or drag them back to
it's just
Spain.
Like, St. Nicholas has this great legend about him that he was very helpful and generous, and someone looked at that story and said, you know what this really great guy needs? A sidekick who chops up children and prepares them for food.
Right. I know. Why? And nobody had a problem with it. And so for our next 3 anti-Santas, they kind of all go together. They're a trio in Icelandic culture, so we're going to cover them real fast. Just because they're kind of fun and interesting and really strange. So the first...
I'm excited for you to do Icelandic pronunciations.
I think I can do it.
We've never touched that.
So the first we're going to talk about is Jólakötturinn. And Jólakötturinn is the Icelandic Yule Cat or Christmas cat. Sounds cuddly, right? Maybe.
Yeah, cute.
He's not a nice cat. He's not. In fact, he might eat you.
So like a normal cat.
Basically, yes. He's pretty much what you'd expect. So, Jólakötturinn is a character tied to an Icelandic tradition in which those who finished all their work on time received new clothes for Christmas, while those who were lazy did not. Although this was mainly a threat and not something that actually happened. To encourage children to work hard, parents told the tale of the Yule Cat, saying that Jólakötturinn could tell who the lazy children were because they did not have at least one new item of clothing for Christmas. And these children would be sacrificed to the Yule Cat. This reminder tends to spur children into doing their chores. A poem written about the cat ends with a suggestion that children help out the needy so they too can have the protection of new clothing.
Well, that's nice.
Is it? I mean, I guess it has like a positive eventual lesson, but
motivates kids to work hard and be good and then to give to the needy. And honestly,
or
like, this is a really smart approach by Icelandic parents, because as a kid, were you ever excited to get clothes as a gift?
No, but if I thought a cat was going to come eat me, I'd be like, yes, a sweater.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. If you thought your life was on the line, you'd be so excited to unwrap those socks.
Absolutely. I'd be like, thank goodness. No Yule Cat this year. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of cats
a new
myself.
Sweater.
And I feel like a giant Yule Cat eating me at Christmas time because I didn't buy new clothes for myself sounds like my worst nightmare. Along with Jólakötturinn is Jólasveinar. The Jólasveinar, or Yule Lads, are 13 Icelandic trolls, who each have a name and a distinct personality. I guess kind of like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but more trollish. In ancient times, the Yule Lads stole things and caused trouble around Christmas time, so they were used to scare children into behaving, similar to the Yule Cat.
And every other anti-Santa.
Yeah, exactly. However, the 20th century brought tales of the benevolent Norwegian figure Julenis, or Santa Claus, who brought gifts to good children. The traditions became mingled until the formerly devilish Jólasveinar became kind enough to leave gifts and shoes that children leave out. If they are good boys and girls, that is. So these ones are a little bit more like mythic, like fairy tale-esque. They don't seem scary, at least. They just cause cause trouble.
They're mischievous.
They're like the Grinch. They steal Christmas things, I guess. And to round out this wonderful Icelandic family is Guerrilla, which is the mother of the 13 Yule Lads, and they answer to her. She predates them in Icelandic legend as an ogress who kidnaps, cooks, and eats children who don't obey their parents. She's a little bit more, I think, harmful than the Yule Lads. To cook you and eat you. She's also portrayed as really, really terrifying. Like the ugliest, scariest ogress type, I don't know, witch that you could imagine. She's got big fangs.
Yeah.
She only actually became associated with Christmas in the 17th century, when she was assigned to be the mother of the Yule Lads. According to legend, Guerrilla had 3 different husbands and 72 children, all who caused trouble.
Busy woman.
So I have a terrible thought, and that's that if she had 72 children, I kind of get why she'd want to, find them and kill them and eat them. 72 children. Is that like one a year for your entire adulthood?
Well, they couldn't afford to feed all of them, so they have to start cooking some of them. Oh, God.
This got dark. Woo.
Yep. This just now got dark. We've been talking about tormenting children for like half an hour.
That's true.
Longer, probably.
You're not wrong. So she's got 3 different husbands, 72 children, all who cause trouble.
See?
Ranging from harmless mischief to murder.
Oh, jeez.
So I feel like this is also a cautionary tale about not having too many children.
The Icelandic are some weird people, man.
Well, as if the household wasn't crowded enough with the 72 children, and 13 of which are the Yule Lads causing trouble at Christmas time. The Yule Cat, the giant Yule Cat, also lives with Guerrilla. I don't know if
Well, that's good.
Jólakötturinn is in the garage, or like Clifford, he just lives outside.
Christmas must be horrifying in Iceland.
And Germany and Austria. What is wrong? Like, what is happening? No wonder they pulled Saint Nick onto the scene. They were like, this is some dark stuff. Children are running around the streets terrified and traumatized.
Do you think America needs an anti-Santa?
Not really. I don't know. I don't really see the benefit of it. I don't think it's an efficient, effective way to encourage positive behavior through fear.
I think we already have one. It's that freaking elf on the shelf. Except
he's an anti-Santa.
Instead of torturing children, he's just a little snitch.
That's true.
He spies on you, and then he runs back to Santa and tattles.
He's a snitch. Elf on the shelf.
Well, got anything else? Any more horrible characters?
No, that's it for the murderous, psychopathic, demon-laden list of anti-Santas.
Well, this was interesting. I mean, I got a couple questions for you, so if you want to do some trivia.
Can't wait. Krampus quiz questions.
I don't know how it's going to compare to all this.
I'm excited for it.
All right, well, we'll take a quick break and then we'll get into some trivia. When we decided to make a podcast, the first thing we did was download Anchor.
Because we have no money, and Anchor is free.
You can also record and edit your podcast right from your phone or a computer.
Then, it only takes one click to share your podcast to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more.
And because we have no money, Anchor helps pair us with advertisers and lets our listeners support the History's B-Side podcast directly on our page.
If you've got an idea for your own podcast, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed our Christmas-themed History's B-Side so far with all kinds of fun characters from around the world. As you probably know, we like to end every episode with a short 3-question quiz to kind of test today's host, which is Matt, to see how much he's studied around his topic, and if maybe you, the listeners, have heard of some of these, you might be able to answer them as well. Either way, it's been kind of a fun and interesting episode.
Interesting to say the least.
A little different than how we normally do it, but definitely some fun characters and people from history and culture. Do we need to have our conversation as to whether or not we think these are good people?
I think they're all bad people. Like, solidly, at least the ones that beat children at any point. Hans Trapp ate them. Guerrilla ate them. Frau Perkta.
Hans Trapp had a redemption story. Bellschnickel gives out candy.
I don't think that means they're good. Just because you're handing out candy while you're doing what you're doing does not mean you're good.
Do you know how expensive candy is today?
I mean, I don't think we can say you're a good person if you're handing out candy to children across the board.
I mean, seems like a nice thing.
But it doesn't absolve you of your
beating them.
It doesn't absolve you of your beatings.
All right, fine.
This seems like narcissistic gaslighting. No, I'm good to you. I gave you candy after.
No, those are separate kids. Gives candy to some and
That's true. It's really just be a good kid and you're good, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's the lesson of today's episode. Don't misbehave. You won't get your organs ripped out and then replaced with garbage and chopped up and cooked and whatever else happens to you. Eaten by a cat.
Seems pretty simple.
All right, let's get into the quiz.
All right.
So I have 3 questions for you. The first one is going to pertain to the history of Santa Claus and kind of like his origin story, how it took shape. So I don't know how much you really researched that because I kind of read into that a little bit more. But the last 2 are related to 2 of the anti-Santas that you discussed.
Okay.
So maybe you'll have a chance on some of that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Question number 1. In 1812, which was 11 years before that "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" poem was published. So in 1812, a very famous American author first wrote that Santa came, quote, "rattling down the chimney to bring his yearly presents to children," end quote.
An American writer.
an American author, and this was published in his short story titled Knickerbocker's History of New York. So I don't know if you've heard of that, but that's your first hint. For your first question, in 1812, which was 11 years before that famous 'Twas the Night Before Christmas poem, a famous American author first wrote that Santa Claus, or St. Nicholas, came, quote, rattling down the chimney to bring his yearly presents to children, end quote, in his short story titled Knickerbocker's History of New York. This writing was the first ever reference to St. Nicholas or Santa going down a chimney. This author is also famous for another holiday-themed writing. Can you name either the author or his much more famous book? And I'll give you a hint that his other famous holiday-themed writing is not a Christmas story. It's a different holiday. And if you need another hint, that holiday is Halloween.
Oh, it's a Sleepy Hollow. I definitely wouldn't have gotten this without that hint. What is his name? Washington Irving.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes, Washington Irving, who wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
I never would have got that without that hint.
He was the first person to reference St. Nicholas or Santa Claus going down a chimney.
Dang.
That's great. I gave you some hints, but I'm impressed that you got that.
I don't remember why. I was just looking at this Legend of Sleepy Hollow for some reason.
Well, that worked out. All right, question number 2. Other than Germany and small pockets of the US and Canada, what other country has communities who celebrate the tradition of Bellschnickel?
Outside of Germany, Austria, and the US?
And Canada.
And Canada. Of Bellschnickel.
If you want a continent, I'll give you a continent.
I don't... What would go with those? Bellschnickel, outside of Germany, Austria. Where did Germany, I'm trying to think of where Germany colonized. I feel like it's probably somewhere in Africa. Is that...
It's not in
Dang.
Africa.
Is it Russia?
No, it's in South America.
Oh. Left field. I have no idea. Bellschnickel in... I know Argentina had some, more Italian immigrants. I'm going to go with Argentina.
Nope.
Dang.
Brazil.
Really?
The Brazilian state of Santa Catarina has communities who celebrate the tradition of Bellschnickel.
Interesting.
And just for more specific clarification, in the U.S., it's usually celebrated by the Pennsylvania Dutch and certain communities in Indiana. In Canada, Bellschnickel is found in Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and the Prairie provinces.
I was thinking South Africa because it was a Dutch colony, but...
Yeah, I didn't see why Bellschnickel made it to Brazil, but I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
That's the one other... you can kind of understand the U.S. and Canada, but it's kind of weird that Brazil is the one other country that has some Bellschnickel.
Yeah, for sure. All right, 1 for 2.
All right, so question number 3. You mentioned earlier in the episode that the 13 Yule lads all have their own names and personalities.
Oh, no.
How many of those 13 Yule lads can you name?
None.
And I'm not looking for the Icelandic names. Give me the English translations.
I don't think I can name any of them. That's terrible.
They're hilarious.
Give them to me because it's just going to be me guessing. I did not cover the names of the Yule lads.
Okay, so this is going to be a longer answer because I do want to go through them because they're really funny.
Yeah.
But Sheepcoat Claude, who tries to suckle ewes in farmers' sheep sheds. This is like a tongue twister. Gullygawk, who steals from foam buckets of cow's milk. Stubby, who's short and steals food from frying pans.
That sounds hot.
Spoon licker.
Spoon licker.
Who licks spoons.
That's his whole thing.
Yep. Pot scraper, aka pot licker, who steals unwashed pots and licks them clean.
Oh my god. Why do I feel like this is I don't know, the mothers, the Icelandic mothers trying to keep their children from eating the food while they make Christmas dinner and cookies. Spoon liquor.
What's funny is I got this list of all their names from like the Smithsonian Museum website. So there's like, I guess, legitimacy to these.
Spoon liquor.
So the next one is Bowl Liquor, who steals bowls of food from under the beds.
Under the beds?
Back in the old days, apparently Icelanders stored bowls of food under their beds, which was convenient for midnight snacking.
Naturally.
Door Slammer stomps around and slams doors, which keeps everyone awake. Geir Gobbler, who eats up all the Icelandic yogurt, which is called Skyr. This is my favorite one. Sausage Swiper, who loves stolen sausages.
Oh my gosh, these are so funny. I want a cartoon made out of this.
Window Peeper, who likes to creep outside windows and sometimes steal the stuff he sees inside. Door Sniffer, who has a huge nose and an insatiable appetite for stolen baked goods.
Door Sniffer.
Meat Hook, who snatches up any meat left out, especially smoked lamb. And finally, Candle Beggar, who steals candles, which used to be sought-after items in Iceland.
Oh my god.
Probably because they don't have daylight for half the year.
I getting a visit from them just sounds like a party, frankly. Like one runs in, starts taking...
Your house would be destroyed.
Stealing all the sausage. Another one's sitting in a tub of yogurt. One's under the bed licking bowls. Two of them are by the stove licking spoons and pots. Jeez. One's just outside sniffing the door for baked goods.
I am shocked that you didn't get any of these.
I didn't even see a list of them. That's a failure on my part.
This is the first question I thought of was, who are these Yule
Yule
lads?
lads.
And I need to find out more about them.
I should have thought
They
of
would
that.
make a great cartoon. I wonder if I bet there is one made somewhere.
There has to be.
All right, so I do have one bonus question for you too.
Okay.
You might get this. Certainly people who watch The Office should get
no.
this. But since we brought it up, I figured I'd include it in the episode. Your bonus question is, obviously we know that Dwight dressed up as Bellschnickel for that episode. Which Office character portrayed Black Peter? And I don't remember if this was in an episode or a deleted scene, but one character did dress up as Black Peter, although he never actually went inside the office.
It had to have been Michael. It had to have been Michael.
It was not
It was
Michael.
not Michael.
This episode was after Michael was off the show, I believe. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was very late in the
Is it
season.
Will Ferrell?
No. It was Mose.
Oh, that makes sense. I didn't even think about that. Shoot.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they showed him in the parking lot. And I think it's like Oscar is the one who says that Bellschnickel is often pictured with a racist caricature named Black Peter. And Dwight's like, oh, of course we're not doing that. And then he texts Mose, who's in the parking lot dressed as Black Peter, and he leaves. I feel like that might have been a deleted scene because I think The Office would have got some flack for that. But maybe, I don't remember. I'll have to go back and watch that episode, see if it's actually in there.
I feel like The Office slid in and got away with a lot of stuff that they could get away with no longer.
Yeah. They were aired at the perfect time right before a lot of comedy had to be a lot more conscientious of the public perception of certain jokes.
Yeah. Well, that was an enlightening episode. I feel like I'm gonna have a couple nightmares. I don't know about you.
Yeah, we don't normally touch on fiction and fantasy as much as we did in this episode, but there is a lot of like historical context to the culture behind these two, and I think it's cool to know some of the other stories behind Christmas that we don't always celebrate or have heard of.
Maybe thankfully so.
Yeah, at least as children, they're fun as adults.
I feel like maybe we've done
Definitely.
a disservice by bringing these up and teaching people about them.
Oh, we are definitely celebrating Krampus Nacht when we have kids.
Right. Bring the chains and birch rods. As always, we really appreciate our listeners for taking time out of their week to catch each of our episodes. We put a lot of work into them, and it's really wonderful to have people interested to listen to us spew about history once a week. If you have any questions or comments for us, please feel free to reach out at historiesbside@gmail.com or reach out to us on social media.
And if you are listening to this when it publishes, we just want to say Merry Christmas from History's B-Side. However you celebrate it, we hope you have a wonderful holiday, and thank you for tuning in.
We'll see you next week.
History's B-Side is an independent, listener-supported podcast.
Leave us a review or subscribe to the show on your favorite podcasting service. And follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at History's B-Side.
Send us your feedback or inquire about sponsorship and advertising opportunities by emailing us at historiesbside@gmail.com.
You can donate to the show at buymeacoffee.com/historiesbside. While you're there, check out our membership perks, merchandise, and more.
This episode was researched and produced by your hosts, Matt Melito
and Phil Hall. Thanks for listening to History's B-Side.